Hello class, I want to introduce you to the course Introduction to Psychology. My name is Dr. Neil Soggie. A little bit about myself. I have a PhD in psychology and I've been teaching psychology for well over 20 years, and I've also been working as a counselor and therapist all of that time. Now, you can address me as Dr. Soggie or Professor if you forget how to pronounce my name. Just think of it as Stogie Cigar. If you say Soggie, that's fine. I'm going to respond. But that's not how you pronounce my name. My name is Soggie. So probably the easiest thing is just call me Neil. It's my name, and I'm not going to get hung up on all the formalities. Now, as far as psychology goes, and this course in particular, I want to take some time, and if you could take some time and read through the course line. And with the course, there are some standard components that I want you to be mindful of. The first part, obviously, is the online lectures. Now, the online lectures, I will try not to keep them going for hours and hours, because that's not the best way for people to learn. It's better for you to have some lecture time, but also be able to interact with that material for a period of time. And so I want to leave some time for that. And so the first few weeks of the course will be a little bit lighter, so you will be able to ease your way into the course and feel good about the course. As you get familiar with the semester, though, I do want you to get into a bit of a routine. So I want you to do the lectures, and obviously to read the material in the textbook and any other material on the Moodle site, because if you are not exposed to the material, you cannot learn the material. Now, in my lecture is not comprehensive of everything that's in the readings, and not everything in the readings is comprehensive of what's in the lecture. You need both. So what I encourage you to do is sometime on Monday and Tuesday to read all the assigned readings for the week, including the chapters in the textbook, and also obviously to watch the lecture on Monday. What else I'd like you to do on Monday is to go into the discussion section, and there will be a discussion question for the week, and to post a thoughtful response to that discussion question. And then later on in the week, depending upon the course schedule, and that's outlined in the syllabus, I'm going to want you to reply to at least 2 peer posts. So give some in-depth thought about the posts. Don't just say, yeah, I like that, that's a really cool observation, but read what they have to say, do a little bit of research on it, and give some thoughtful response to it. Remember, always be kind and positive and treat the way you want to be treated. Be professional, but at the same time, give some depth to your response. And that's what I'm going to be looking for. What are you adding to the discussion? So, watch the lecture, do the readings, do any other additional readings that are set up, post for the discussion, and then do some more thought reflection and some responses for your peer posts. And that will be a good routine to get into for the week. Now, there will be some tests, and the weeks that there are tests, we will not be having discussion time, so that you have time to prepare for the tests. So there will be lectures the weeks that there are tests. So normally I'll have the lectures on Monday, and then the tests available midweek, so that you have time for both. The tests are normally 1 hour online, normally multiple choice. And if you have any accommodations, the test will be timed for 1 hour. So if you have accommodations, then please let me know, and I'll be sure to set up those accommodations. So there is a routine that you will need to get into. Another expectation of the course is that you write a term paper, that you write a well-researched paper in APA format. And there are a few things that I wish to highlight regarding APA formatting. Now, traditionally, APA formatting has been one standard format, but in the last edition, the 7th edition, they broke it into 2 different types, the professional format and the student format. And I don't really appreciate that, because part of the goal of being a student is to learn how to be a professional, and so I'm going to want you to practice using the professional format, not the student format. So if you ever see any differences, please always use the professional. And there are just some small minor points. Now, normally I will have the maximum number of pages for the paper be about 15 pages for an introduction to psychology paper. And I have a maximum just to keep it manageable for myself, because I will typically have hundreds of papers to mark in the course of a semester. So please do not ask for the minimum, because 15 pages is not a lot, because APA numbers every page, and everything in APA is double spaced. So title page is number 1, abstract is number 2, body of the paper is number 3. So in APA professional formatting, you have a running head and page number. Those are the things that I'm looking for. Here, obviously, you're going to have your name and the name of the paper. Whatever else you have on your title page, I'm not going to be too worried about. But those are the main things that I'm looking for you to have on the title page. Really, the reason why I want you to use the professional formatting is that in the professional formatting is page 2, which is the abstract. An abstract is essentially a summary of what you have done in the paper. So it will say abstract, and then there will be one blocked paragraph, not indented, that summarizes what you're saying, normally less than 200 words. And then there normally will be keywords afterwards. And the keywords are there so that if this paper were ever published, then the publisher would enter in those keywords so that someone else could find this. And I think it's important for you to get into the practice of writing abstracts, because that can be extremely helpful in your professional setting later on. And then you have the body of the paper. And body of the paper starts with page 3. So at the top of the page, you're going to have your running head. You're going to have the page number. Below that, you're going to have centered the name of the paper again, and then you start writing your paper. And then after you're writing your paper, that might be 7-8 pages, then you're going to have the references section, which is also numbered. So you're going to have your running head, you're going to have the term references centered in the middle, and you're going to have the page number. And then after that, you're going to have all the references that you used. Try to avoid using encyclopedias or online, just non-professional websites, because the quality of those are suspect, or at least very much out of date. And I want you to get into the practice of using peer-reviewed journals. Now, how many references should you have? Well, I'm not going to hold you to a hard and fast rule, But when I teach graduate students, so those that have already earned a bachelor's degree, I will tell them that I'm looking for 2 new sources per page of text. Now, I'm not going to hold you to that, but that is something for you to strive for within your paper. So if you have 7 pages for the body of your text, you would have 14 references. And that would be a good, reasonable amount of research that you have used to back up your paper. Now, when it comes to writing a paper, remember that, as I mentioned already, everything in APA is double-spaced. When you're writing your paper, please try to use a font that looks professional, like Arial or New Times Roman. Please do not use New Courier font. Every professor knows that New Courier font uses up more space, so when we see it, we cringe a little bit because it's kind of a way of killing space. So try to avoid that. It's not tricking anyone. Now, when it comes to submitting your paper, I prefer that you submit it through the Moodle drop site, and it will be set up for the week that it's due. If there's any question, you can always email me your paper. When it comes to the format for your paper, I want you to submit it in PDF format. And the reason for that is if you submit it in any other word processor document, when I open it in my computer, because of the variability in word processing programs, it may not look formatted properly. And I want you to get all the marks you can for proper formatting and APA formatting. So try to submit it in PDF. That way we can assure that what you gave me is what I see. Now, if you want to get in contact with me, please feel free to email me. I will always try to get back to you within a day or two, if not within a few hours. And I want you to feel comfortable with asking me questions. Now, within the what we'll be covering in this course, in the Introduction to Psychology, there's really a lot of reasons why people take a course like this. Maybe you think there's an aunt, that you have an aunt that's crazy and that you want to help them be less crazy. Or maybe you want to be a better student and you want to learn how to memorize things and process information better. Or maybe you want to improve your sex life. Or maybe you want to be able to interpret dreams. Or maybe you want to win new friends or influence people. Or to develop a perfect memory. And none of these are bad reasons. And this course will likely help you in a lot of those areas. Unfortunately, we're not going to be covering any human sexuality within this course, but there are valuable human sexuality courses in psychology that I think would be valuable for every individual. Now, the scientific study of psychology really has a lot of real-world relevance to a lot of problems that we face every day. And I really am sure that as we go through this course, you will find some of these things very valuable. And one of the goals that I have within this course are that you be able to connect your experience and the experiences of your peers with the lessons that we are covering within the class. And that's part of the reason why I want to have the discussion time, because your experiences are valuable, your peers' experiences are valuable, and they all transform the very clinical theories into more real-world experiences that we can kind of make sense of. Overall, generally, I want you to be able to come away with some good general concepts of what is going on with the field of psychology, how psychological knowledge is generated, a little bit of the history of psychology, and some basic building blocks within psychology that will help you to understand yourself and the people around you. And I believe that will go a long way to helping us reach the ultimate goal of understanding and predicting human behavior. And that's a lot of what psychology is all about. Now, as part of your learning process and questions that you will have, as far as getting good marks in this class, one of the things that I always tell students is that a large part of psychology is simply learning the vocabulary. When you know the vocabulary, the concepts will follow. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the vocabulary and emphasizing the vocabulary. The vocabulary is in the textbook, and that is why the textbook is there. If there are words that you don't know, please look them up. But when it comes to your studying, is emphasized studying the vocabulary, memorizing the vocabulary, learning the vocabulary. That is part of what you need to focus on as a student. Now, let's go on and talk a little bit about the basics of this course. Psychology really is an interesting story. It's a story about the relationship between concepts that we have historically had about our spirit and our soul, and who we are and the views that we have about what it means to be human, and how that's changed over time. How we've learned more from both philosophy and from biology and from anthropology. And so there's a lot of what we have learned over the centuries, adding layers of understanding to get a better sense of what it is to be human, what our spirit really is made of. So we've gone from a dualistic perspective where the spirit is one part and the materialistic world is another part, and realizing that there really is a intertwining between the physical and the material. The meaning and the biology is mixed together. So it isn't necessarily that there's a puppeteer and a puppet, that there's a spirit and a body, but everything is melded together. And so we use psychology through developing an understanding of natural law, and we can use those observations to make sense about what is going on within a person. And then psychology becomes a very fascinating field, because we start to see there is this connection between the physical and the spiritual. And this connection is so deep and so profound that it goes beyond the Cartesian dualism. So we're not just a soul that controls a body. We are both. We are a living being. And in the most ancient cultures, ancient Near Eastern word for this is nephesh, which is a living spirit. It's a connection of the spirit and the body together. It's an animated physicality that takes place. And if we think in terms of nephesh, we get a better sense of how we see ourselves today. It isn't necessarily the spirit and the body, the Cartesian dualism. it's an integration of both. And for the Christian, it really is a biblical concept, because the term nephesh is the oldest Hebrew term for the living soul. And so even in an understanding from a theological perspective, there is this understanding of people as an integrated system. Now, the wonderful thing about the science of research is that we have observations that have brought this integration together. For example, in the 1800s, there's a fellow by the name of Paul Broca, and he was visiting various institutions, and he noticed that across institutions, patients with similar symptomatology keep cropping up. And it was that people that had specific damage or tumor to a specific area of the brain, there was a disruption in the way that they processed language or expressed language, that they had problems with functioning language. And that helped to identify what is now called the Broca's area, which is a part of the left hemisphere in your brain that helps to process memory. The same thing happened with what is called this Wernicke's area, where another part of the left hemisphere was discovered to have a very specific function, just like a machine, in the processing of language, the high level of understanding and processing language. And language is such a uniquely human thing, or we think of it as such a uniquely human thing, that this discovery was profound, and this has spawned a lot of research. And so now we have all sorts of subfields of neuroscience that looks at brain functioning, brain development, the way that we identify objects, the way that we interact with objects, the way that we speak about objects, the way that we play games. All of this provides insight into how we function, so that the discipline of psychology really spills over into all other areas of philosophy and computer science and anthropology and literature and even theology. And so it's such a valuable topic to cover and to engage in. Now, there are a lot of areas that we're going to cover in this class. Now, when my son was younger, he would dress up as Spider-Man and run around and play, and even when it wasn't Halloween. And so the question that a parent could ask, myself in this case, is this developmentally appropriate? Now, if he's 26 and running around and dressing up as Spider-Man and running around and shooting his webs, well, that's probably not developmentally appropriate. But if he's 3 or 4, yeah, absolutely, that's developmentally appropriate. So that's something that we'll take a look at. We'll also take a look at how the brain functions. We'll look at how do we generate knowledge and process knowledge. We'll look at how do we taste? How do we perceive and sense smells or touch? Why are we attracted to the people we're attracted to? Why are there these differences within people? And there are lots of different questions that go on here. Why, for example, do we feel about these different aspects of morality? What is morality? How do we process morality? What forms how we think what is good or what is evil? Finally, we'll take a look at language within this course. How do we develop language? How do we process language? How do we memorize things? And all of those things are just absolutely fascinating. And after you continue on with me for the second part of this course, then we get at even more interesting things. And we will take a look at things like, who can you trust to help you in different situations? How do you understand people? We'll take a look at what is reality, what is a delusion, what is dimensions, what are psychological problems. And then it gets really fascinating, because then when you get into abnormal psychology, for example, there's something called the Capgras delusion, which is a delusion where either an individual or a group of people have been replaced by aliens or imposters or robots. Joseph Capgras first described this in the 1920s, and he and another author took a look at a 53-year-old woman, and this woman was convinced that someone had replaced her husband and her daughter, and that her husband and her daughter were doubles, that they were essentially aliens. And so Capgras delusion is essentially where you misidentify people and objects or people. And so we'll take a look at that next semester. And we'll take a look at other disorders as well that are just absolutely fascinating in how we perceive reality. And how our reality isn't necessarily the same as everyone else's reality, because everyone lives in their own little world. So all of that will be part of what we look at over the course of the whole year, between Introduction to Psychology 1 and Introduction to Psychology 2. But I want you to just remember to immerse yourself in this topic as much as you can, and be open to the wonderful and fascinating things that occur in people, including yourself, because the more you engage in this process, the more you're going to learn about yourself, and you are fascinating. And with that, I'm going to stop for my lecture for this week, and please take some time to look through the course syllabus, the course expectations,